World Financial Planning Day is upon us. Financial planning involves several steps, including knowing your priorities, knowing your financial goals, and also how much time you need to achieve these. Today, I'm joined by Dilshad Billimoria, who is Managing Director and Principal Officer for Dilzer Consultants. She'll be taking us through the various steps involved in financial planning, as well as tell us what a good financial plan should look like. Hi, Dilshad.
Hi, thank you for having me, Jeff.
You're most welcome. Thanks a lot for joining us today. Dilshad,
Thank
to start with, how should an individual evaluate what she or he should be focusing on in their financial plan?
Right, so that typically comes as a problem statement from our clients. Either we get inquiries with reference to a problem of having, say, for example, too much debt or too much loans that a person is carrying, and therefore it's impacting their cash flows. Or we get somebody who has been sold a lot of policies, and again, it's impacting their cash flows. Or we might get somebody who's skewed in terms of their asset allocation, and that could be because they have too much real estate in the portfolio, and therefore they're not having enough liquidity or financial assets to help meet their goals. There's no rocket science to this. It's quite simple in terms of, if you have a certain number of resources and you have X number of goals, we try and match those resources to various goals. So I think it's important for the client to keep in mind that goals should be, like the SMART goals, right? So it needs to be, realistic. It needs to be time bound. It needs to be achievable. So these are some of the pointers that we try and the investor or the client before they actually take upon them the actual implementation of a financial plan. We also sometimes drive upon the importance of financial literacy and highlight factors of market volatility and the importance, therefore, of staying long term in their plan and goals, so that they're able to achieve them in a realistic manner.
Right. And also, when it comes to financial plan, there are various aspects to it. Having an emergency fund would be one of them. How important it is, according to you, when one is, thinking of having a financial plan, to also set aside some funds for an emergency corpus?
Yeah, that's very important. So by default, we try and build in an emergency fund for every client, they ask for it or not. Typically, that would be depending on if both the husband and wife are working. We normally have a 6-month kind of emergency, which includes their expenses as well as their liabilities also covered. If there's a single working person, then we normally take it up to a year in terms of creating an emergency fund. And of course, then it could be sidelines in terms of widows or in terms of single women. And so every case is unique, and it is very important, however, to have an emergency fund.
And can you also elaborate a bit on, insurance, how important it is to be adequately insured? What are the few things that an individual must keep in mind before looking for an insurance product?
Right. Health insurance and life insurance are some of the must-haves that we suggest, when we're drawing up our recommendations. Very often there's a misnomer that if somebody is working with the corporate and they're adequately insured, especially at the senior level, in terms of a life cover or a term insurance, we always urge them to have a separate, insurance, independent of their company cover. And that's an important point, so that you can draw upon those benefits at later years. Even in terms of health insurance, we lay down certain guidelines as to what would be the ideal cover depending on the permutation of the family. So if it's just a single couple, or if it's a couple with one child or two children, we normally lay down the factors. We also highlight the importance and exclusions in each of these health plans. When it comes to the term insurance, we follow the need-based approach in evaluating an importance of term insurance, whereby we take into consideration their expenses and their loans and important primary goals to help achieve their, to identify basically what is that amount of that they would need.
Also, can you talk about how important investments are? I mean, of course, investments are important, but how investments can help in achieving financial goals, how important it is to be in the right product that also matches the time you might have left to achieve those financial goals. Can you, talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so that's a very important point, Josh. So very often when we draw out a plan, I think the first thing that people don't realize sometimes is implementation of the plan is very important, right? So if it just remains a blueprint without actually, going into the nitty-gritties and actually deploying your investments or resources to meet certain goals, which is the whole purpose of which the financial plan was drawn, then the whole purpose of that exercise is defeated. Okay, so first, it's very important to even communicate and I would say educate the client as to why we are doing the whole exercise. Coming to the actionables, there again we clearly evaluate one's current resources, both financial and non-financial, and try and ensure that the gaps are met in terms of their goal realization. For those that are not, we normally recommend investment products that are suitable to the time horizon and of course meet the risk profile of the goal, right, of the investor as well. Ideally, we would hope that the investment matches the time horizon of the goal, but it's very difficult when it comes to actual practical kind of aspects and reality. People do always plan for the long term, but somewhere in between they get swayed by either their own behavior or their family asking them for various other kind of goals that might come in. So it's quite a challenging exercise, and to make them understand the importance of that long-term investing. And I think we take them through the basis as to why they started it and what was the objective, what was the requirement. And basis that, we try and make them understand the importance of, staying the course basically for meeting their goals.
Sure. And also, can a simple exercise of, tracking your expenses and income on a monthly basis, can that also be an important part of your financial planning?
Oh, yes. So it's interesting because we get a varied kind of, clientele. Some of them are very, very methodical. And, before they actually have a proper Excel sheet where they've monitored their inflows and outflows over the last 6 months. Some of them, when we share the data gathering sheet, which is very, complex and detailed, actually get put off because there's a lot of information that we're asking for, and the information needs to be accurate and it needs to be up to date, right? Only then the whole planning exercise becomes meaningful. So what we try and do is step by step we try and along with them, so that they don't feel that this is only their kind of thing to do and it's not left to them. So we try and say that let us start by doing this exercise together. Let us start filling this together, so that we're able to reduce or ease that burden of helping them identify what are their goals, what are their expenses, because sometimes we go so deep into the expenses as to what you're spending on your credit cards, what you're spending on your lifestyle expenses, what you're spending for maids or household. So it becomes a quite intimidating for a few. But for many also, they like this exercise because then they realize that, okay, this is my net disposable savings or my cash flows that are available after taking into consideration all expenses and all liabilities. So it's an eye-opener. because many say that, hey, I'm earning so much and I really don't see the end of the month, that kind of balance which would help me save. And that's where we put our foot down and say, hey, why don't you just create first a savings for yourself and then move into your own expenses? Because the moment you see your bank swelling, you automatically use that towards various expenses, some of which may be unwanted. So it's quite interesting to see that kind of, pan out differently among different individuals.
Right. And, when it comes to debt, how should an investor or an individual, approach debt?
Yeah. So when it comes to debt, there is good and bad debt. Good debt could be, where you are generating assets, like, for example, a house, or even if you're planning for higher education or studies, right? So there you are obviously adding to the knowledge bucket. So we encourage, especially when it's good debt, also from the point of view of tax planning. When it comes to bad debt, I mean, we discourage to a very large extent. Like I started my conversation, many come to us with very high credit card loans or revolving credit, right, as we put it. So this is a big kind of understanding that we try and draw upon them, and how the interest is compounded on a monthly basis, and therefore they end up paying between 38 to 42% sometimes on revolving credit. So it's just important to kind of prioritize what are the kind of debts that they have, and basis their cash flows or their disposable incomes or salaries or even their bonuses. We even suggest strategies in a debt management part of the financial plan as to how best they would reduce the debt. And we actually show them, the numbers by doing these kind of things of either making a balloon payment or increasing your EMIs every month. How much are you saving in terms of your interest? And how best you can repay the loan without impacting, because people don't realize that even in a home loan, you're paying double typically of what you've taken as a loan over the tenure. And that kind of, understanding in financial literacy is very important and an eye-opener for many, to say the least.
Sure. And also, Dilshad, financial planners like yourselves, help several individuals, families achieve their financial goals, help them draft a financial plan. I wanted to ask you, as you are on the other side of the table, what are the things that individuals must disclose to financial planners, and, which basically will help them offer the individual sound financial advice? Any tips on that?
So very often people withhold sometimes their income, right? They leave out typically a bonus, or they might inflate their expenses because they just want to ensure that they're paid safe when it comes to their financial planning. Or sometimes they are not disclosing all their assets. So typically non-financial assets are sometimes not disclosed. What we also see sometimes, investment in assets like gold, etc., are not revealed. But we try and tell them that if gold is held as jewelry, we really don't want that information, because that is not considered as an investable or a financial asset, and therefore it's not going to help us in the planning exercise. But I think it's important, and they do realize along the course of the way that sharing the information as accurately as possible. And sometimes they get stuck with policies which are many or which are very old. In those cases, we try and ask them to share the policy document with us to make it much more easier for them, because they might not know what are the data points that we are looking at when it comes to that collection of data. So we try and aid and hold their hand in each of each step of that process, so that they're able to ease the burden for them as well.
Sure. Okay, thanks a lot, Dilshad, for joining us today and taking us through various steps of financial planning, and also explaining the importance of each of these steps. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Thank you so much, Josh. It was a pleasure.